Hi, I'm glad to be here. She's absolutely right. Sarah's absolutely right. It is probably laziness that caused me to pick these plants, but I do like the plants that are willing to keep going when I'm ready to sit inside and look at my garden through the window. As Sarah mentioned, I grew up in Wichita, South Wichita, still live there. Went to Wichita State, got my degree in elementary education. My last long-term teaching assignment was at the Sedgwick County Zoo. And that is such a fun place to go. Like on a coffee break, time for a break, and they say, let's go see the baby peccaries. And it's a lot more interesting than you get at a lot of places. So I did, because of my plant background, do things like create a pollinator garden behind the education building. And I thought, I was pretty proud. I don't know how many individuals added square footage of teaching area to the zoo, but it was a fun job. You can take teachers out of the classroom, but somehow they seem to wander back in. And I find myself now at Friends University. They have a program called Friendship Fields that is for college-age students who have intellectual disabilities. And I've been teaching them about plants, that a lot of life skill kind of things. They have two tracks, one that's more academic and one that's more social and fun. And this year I'm doing the fun stuff, and we are learning so much about plants. And I really mean we. I think that's why I like teaching so much, because I learn all over again. My husband and I used to teach Sunday school, and we didn't want to be guilty of leading the little ones astray and having millstones put around our necks and being dropped into the ocean. So I try to make sure I really understand this stuff before I teach it. And I was teaching about seeds, and I wanted to use peanuts as my example, because often there are just two seeds in a peanut. But I couldn't figure out how peanuts work, because I knew that peanuts grew underground, but their flowers are above ground. And so just a little botany review. In the middle of the flower is the style, kind of a vase-shaped organ, and it has a sticky stigma on the top. And when a pollen grain lands on that, it makes a little tiny tube down to the ovary, and that's where the seeds form. So I just could not figure how that worked with peanuts. And then I found out that after they've been pollinated, they put forth this thing called a peg. And in this picture, they look kind of like beans, but the peg goes underground and the peanuts are produced there, and it all works, and it's so exciting. I learned that potatoes are like hens. They don't need to be pollinated. They don't need a rooster. They just produce potatoes. Corn, every silk has to be pollinated. For each kernel, there's one silk. It's just fascinating. This world of plants just is continually exciting. So back on course here, our greenhouse began as a truck farm. My grandpa and grandma and the kids all grew vegetables to sell. And as they needed more land, they leased some property along South Broadway. And after school, the kids would walk along the railroad tracks and get out their hoes and start working on the garden. And eventually people said, I'd like to grow my own tomatoes. Could you sell me some of your plants? And they built a glass house over their fields, and it became a greenhouse. And fortunately, the greenhouse business is something in which you can include your kids. Like farmers can have their kids work, but in the suburbs, usually dad goes off to an office or a factory and the kids can't participate. But greenhouse business is one where we could. Now, this is the family at the greenhouse. It's a few years old. We lost my dad and haven't had really the heart to take a new one. So this guy back here is in charge now. He's my brother. this little girl's big enough now to run the cash register and help in the business. So it just continues generations and generations working in the greenhouse business. And as Sarah said, I still come back in the spring and get on the phone and help return the plants that we've taken care of over the winter for people. My grandpa, who started the business, always said that this business is recession proof because in good times, people plant flowers and in hard times, they plant vegetables, which has been true. COVID years were good to us. However, he didn't reckon on big box stores or the labor shortage that we're finding now, but still a good business to be in with the family. Oh, when Grandma and Grandpa leased this land to do their truck farming, a farmhouse came with the land. And eventually 5 generations of our family have lived in this house, but the city decided to tear it down. And I went to a bunch of city meetings and they decided that they could move it. They had to move it because it was historically important. And that's what it looked like back after it was built for the daughter of Buffalo Bill Mathewson. So they just moved it 800 yards and set us on fill dirt and clay and 2 acres of Johnson grass. And none of the trees that you see there, except this one right down in the corner, are on our land. So, oops. So we really needed flowers that love the Kansas sun. So when a plant tag says that a plant likes full sun, I want to offer a disclaimer. Many of those plant tags are printed in Michigan or Oregon, and their idea of full sun is not the same as Kansas full sun. It's been said that we're too far south for the northern plants and too far north for the southern plants. And added to that, we have all of this wind. And so things that can grow here can grow anywhere, but it's just different than some of those cushier places where the plant tags are printed. So their full sun isn't like our full sun, and nothing in Kansas minds some respite from the blazing mid-afternoon summer sun. However, my favorites that I'm going to tell you about tonight in my yard don't get it. My husband has become obsessed with planting trees, and someday maybe I'll be able to talk about shade-loving plants, but so far it's things that can take all the sun. So first I'm going to talk about perennials. Characteristics of perennials are that they come back for at least 3 years, often many more. They give structure to the garden. They may cost more initially. Many are not easy to grow from seed. And if you're going to grow them from seed, they often should be planted in the fall, so they go through a winter, or they need to be cold stratified in your refrigerator or your freezer because they need some time of cold before they're going to start. And although the plant is always there, it may only bloom for a week or 2 each season. But, you know, to me, it's still worth it. Like forsythia bushes, you only get that gorgeous yellow for a few weeks in the spring, but I'd hate to go the spring without it. Although most of the plants that I choose do bloom longer. They may spread to surprising places. If you've ever grown mint, you know you can plant them in one place, but have them pop up someplace entirely different. And so there are various perennials that are like that. They may need to be divided or cut back, and they're reliable for wildlife needs. So if you get sick or if you take a vacation or for some other reason, you're not out there planting new stuff, the perennials come back and they make seeds or they make nectar or the things that the local wildlife need. Now, a set of perennials, the first year they sleep, the second year they creep, and the third year they leap. So it does take some patience to be a perennial gardener. So I want to talk to you about my 12 top perennial choices, flowers for sunny locations, and all of these should be readily available in the Wichita area without you having to send off for them. So my first one is Maynite Salvia. So I have the purple. It's a beautiful K-State purple, and it's one of the first things to come up, and my husband chops it down a couple of times a year, and so we get 3 beautiful blooms out of it. And it's in the sage family. There are a lot of sages that are native to Kansas. This acts like it was meant to grow here. It also comes in a white and a pink, but I always have the purple. It draws more bees than anything else in my yard. And lots of times they're those slow, fuzzy bumblebees that are so much fun to watch. We don't do any trimming on it when the bees are there, but the bees are so absorbed in the plant, we've never had any trouble with them. The only drawback to this plant is that it is described as being aromatic. And I don't smell it at all, except when my husband cuts it back. And then to me, it smells like cat urine, which is not my idea of pleasantly aromatic. So except for that, I think it's a perfect plant. The next one that I wanted to mention is Gallardia, Indian blanket flower. There is an annual Gallardia too, but this is the perennial. And there are native Gallardias. And one place that you've always been able to see these in abundance in a meadow is at the Sedgwick County Zoo along Zoo Boulevard or 21st Street in the big open area that's used for overflow parking for Jubilee. And every year I get my students in for summer school and they wanted to work. These were young teenage boys just full of testosterone, wanted to show off what they could do. They could dig up mulberry trees. They were just excited about doing all this stuff. So I thought this is a perfect opportunity to move some of those into my pollinator garden behind the education building. And every year, the week I got the kids, they would mow it down. And when they rebloomed in July, it was just too hot to do much transplanting. So I never got them established there, but they're beautiful out in the fields. In my yard, these just glowed. Any place we put them, clear up into November. Oh, and I have to say something right here. As I was going through all of these flowers that have done so well in my yard, I looked around my yard and said, honey, where are all of these flowers? I'm going to be telling people how well they did in the yard, and I'm not seeing them. Where are they? And he hung his head and said, lawnmower. He got himself a big, beautiful John Deere, and in his effort to fight Johnson grass, he's gotten a little carried away and mown down a lot of my beautiful flowers. So some of them are hardy enough that they will come back. Some of them we will have to start over. He's getting a lot of ribbon about that. Another one that I love is Menarda or B-Balm. It's called B-Balm because the bees are attracted to it. So are the butterflies. The flower heads are edible. You can just throw them in a salad. There are lots of native Menardas. This does have a pleasant scent. It's like Gold Bond powder. It's in the mint family, and the one that I'm used to has that kind of scent and is real tall, but they come in different heights and some of them have a really sweet fragrance. My mom and dad went on a nature hike and they were given Oswego tea made from this plant. And I found out that Oswego tea is a name for the whole plant. Mom said the tea wasn't very nice. She didn't especially enjoy it. But Native Americans use this for all kinds of medicinal purposes. It comes in lots of colors. I want every one. They're just wonderful plants. Oh, they are subject to getting powdery mildew. And there are all kinds of folk remedies like spraying them with diluted powdered milk. But I've never had enough problem with them to feel like they needed treatment. And it doesn't seem to hurt the plant. It just makes the leaves take on kind of a grayish tint. Okay, yarrow, Achillea. This is another one of my favorites. Before we moved yards, we had this just along a meandering path, and every time it would get to be a bigger clump than I needed, I would just yank some of it out, carry it along with me along the path until I found a spot that needed it, plunk it in the ground, water it, and it would just take off like it had never been moved. It comes in lots of colors. There is native yarrow, but it has a history that's amazing. First, the name Achillea comes from Achilles, the great hero of legend. His mom held his heels and dunked him as a baby into the river Styx so that he would be impervious to any wounds in battle. But the place where she was holding his heels didn't get any water. And so, and that was his Achilles heel, and he was shot in the heel and he died. But this plant is native several areas, and it was called herbal militaris because the military men would grab a piece of the leaves, which are ferny and pretty and different than most of the other things we see in the garden, and they'd slap it on a wound and it would stop bleeding. So some of its other names are soldier wort and sanguinary from the word blood. So lots of interesting associations that way. But I recently found out that it was used as a vegetable in the 17th century. They cooked it like spinach. It was also used, was dried and used as a seasoning. One of the things I like best about it is I tend to leave my flowers just in the yard, but my daughter likes to make bouquets. So she got a block of Oasis, that foam that holds water, and stuck in all kinds of things from the yard. And after about a week, different things started dying off, and I picked them out and kept watering it until there was nothing left but the yarrow. And I finally stopped watering the yarrow, and it had dried exactly perfectly as it had been, and maintained its color. If you let it dry in the yard, it turns brown. But so it makes a wonderful dried flower. It's recommended for companion planting, and companion planting really doesn't have any scientific evidence, I guess, but it's supposed to help improve the soil, be good in your compost piles, attract ladybugs, and attract predatory wasps, which are those wasps which find the bad bugs and lay their eggs in the body of the bad bug. So if you come across a pest bug that looks kind of like it has maggots in it, leave it alone, because those are predatory wasp babies eating that bug, and they'll go on to produce more that eat other bad bugs. Okay, Rudbeckia, black-eyed Susan. There are native Rudbeckia, and apparently at some time in history, somebody admired these and took some back to Germany, where they worked on them in the lab, and they made the heads bigger and last longer. And we got the one that's called Goldstrom, which is real popular with a great big head. I had some seeds left from a zoo program that we discontinued, and we just threw them out in the yard. And toward the latter part of the summer, they just pop up every place. And they spread. I wouldn't call them invasive, but they do fill out, and they just don't take any care. They're just beautiful. And what's really exciting about them is when you plant them in swaths, and they can look like this. Echinacea, coneflower. The originals, as far as I can tell, were a purple called Magnus and a white called Swan. And they live for years and years and years. And this is one that is used medicinally in current preparations to fight colds and stuff. But it's one that they've been tinkering with a lot. And we went to Dick Arboretum to get some more Echinacea one year, and they had colors like tomato soup and mac and cheese. And there are also colors like envy and prairie sunset. So just so many kinds of colors. I do like to stick to at least some of the old-fashioned ones, because some of the newer ones like powwow berry, that's gorgeous, just don't last for as many years. And I like to have some that will continue for many years. I think some of the studies show that some of the new ones last for about 5 years, and I'm looking for even more longevity than that. Buddlia butterfly bush is very attractive to butterflies. It has such a woody stem that I feel like I pay the price of a flower and I get a shrub for it. They'll grow nice and maybe 4 feet tall, right up against my porch. And they come now in other colors, white and pink and magenta and even a yellow, I understand. And they, in the fall especially, they're covered with butterflies. We have tried cutting them back to the ground in the fall and in the spring and not doing it at all. And the result seems to be the same. I think if you never cut them back, you'd probably have to thin them out. But I now like to leave them in the winter where the little birds get on them and seem to eat the seeds. And my free range chickens like to hide under them when something scares them in the yard. So Buddlia butterfly bush, lovely flower. This one is Gara. When I first was introduced to it, it was called whirling butterfly. And the stems are really delicate and they kind of drift in the wind. So they kind of look like a butterfly whirling or flying over your other plants. And they look like they would be very delicate, but there are Gara that are native to Kansas, and they are really substantial bushes like this. The zoo planted them out at the entryway where they don't get a whole lot of attention, and they're just magnificent. I had one that, I had two that were this big, and this is the only thing since we're in a new yard that I've had a neighbor stop and say, "What is that flower? It is spectacular." And they lasted almost up till freeze. I think it's been a victim of the lawnmower because I didn't see it this year. Autumn fire sedum. This is supposed to be an improvement of the autumn joy. I personally didn't see a lot of difference. In about August, the color starts changing until you get these blooms and the color starts changing. You would probably look at it and say, oh, that's live forever, because it has a recognizable green leaves and stem with waxy leaves. But in the South, this is called Drunken Bumblebee plant, because the bees that nectar from it just act giddy. They love it so much. Butterflies like it too. Another master gardener told me that just breaking off a leaf and sticking it in the soil, that they were that easy to start. I've never tried propagating my own, but they're described as looking like red broccoli or a bridal bouquet for the jolly green giant's wife. A very nice plant, very easy care. They should be divided at some point, because after 3 or 4 years, they tend to just kind of split down the middle, and that's not especially attractive. So if you go ahead and cut it and move it, spread it out to different places, it is usually really happy. Okay, I have a description of why daylilies are the perfect perennial, because they're available in a rainbow of colors. a variety of shapes and sizes. They're able to survive with very little care in a wide range of climates, suitable for all types of landscapes, drought tolerant when necessary, with relatively few pests and disease problems in most gardens, adaptable to various soil and light conditions, and known to bloom from late spring until autumn. It also seems like you can move them just about any time you have the time and have a shovel. They don't seem to suffer from being disturbed. They're also, the flowers are edible. You can pull out the stamens and wash them, of course, put them on your plate, stuff them with some chicken salad or something. Wouldn't that be pretty on the plate? If you're going to start eating any of these flowers that you haven't never eaten before, go slowly. That might be something that you've never experienced, and you could have an allergic reaction. So beautiful on the plate, try it gently. This is Russian sage, and we planted this at the Alfred Branch Library. We just had a few sprigs. The greenhouse hadn't grown it that year, and so we just took one old plant that we found and divided it, and it's just grown so successfully with no care. It attracts butterflies. It is drought tolerant. It's kind of a nice background plant. Even after the purple fades, there's nice winter interest. Little critters can hide under it. It's really easy care, nice plant. This is lamb's ear. There's one that's called cotton boll. Instead of the purple flowers on the top, it has little balls that look like bowls of cotton. And I like the purple myself. But as you can see, they're kind of untidy plants. They wouldn't make one beautiful specimen plant in your yard, but they're tall and they're a lovely backdrop with their silvery foliage, and they're no stickers. We used to use this at the zoo to let the kids propagate, knowing that they weren't going to run into anything with their fingers that would hurt them. Each leaf is kind of the shape of a lamb's ear, and they're soft and fuzzy. Because the leaves are fuzzy, they don't want to stay wet. They can rot. So you don't want them to be in a depression where they stay wet for a long time, or have the sprinkler hitting them every day. They do need to be able to dry out so that they don't rot. But they're a lovely, lovely plant and good in the background. All right, let's go to annual flowers. So the characteristics of annuals: they grow, bloom, and produce seeds all in 1 year. They're inexpensive. Many are easy to grow from seed. When you buy a tomato plant that already has tomatoes and blooms on it, you're really supposed to pick those up. You don't have to if you get a 6-pack or a 4-pack of petunias. You can leave those on and plant them. Instant gratification. Visual impact from planting to frost. Easy to change from year to year. If K-State disappoints you, you can get rid of all that purple and plant red and blue next year. So whatever you want to do with your annuals, it's easy to change out. They stay where you put them, but they do fill in. And I've got to admit, I usually plant them closer than the tags say, because I want even more instant gratification. I want them to be full from the beginning, which means that they have to be thinned a little. They're usually a better choice for containers. Not that perennials don't look great in containers, but it usually takes a pretty good sized container for them to come back reliably. And if you're buying them for many years, that's not always successful. So, but fill your containers with annuals. They may need pruning or deadheading to look their best. And these are my top 9 for sunny locations. And these also should be easy to find in Wichita. Portulaca, rose moss rose. What a wonderful little plant. Now, it used to be that they closed a lot during the day and were open sort of dawn and dusk, like with bats, dawn and dusk, the word is crepuscular. I don't know if that applies to flowers or not, but they've been bred to stay open longer. There's even a group called Sundial, which were specifically for that purpose. They're drought tolerant. If you can see their little leaves in there are almost like a succulent. They're fleshy, and so they can retain water well. One year we had an entire greenhouse that had them in flats on the floor. And when I looked in there, it looked like a lawn with Easter eggs on it. Just lovely. And they also reseed a bit. My grandma had a planter with them in it, and the seeds blew into the cracks between the pieces of her driveway, and they grew up there. And I just thought it was magical to see flowers growing in the cracks in the driveway. Lantana is one of the most heat tolerant plants that we grow. And the original colors, we think of them as being like tricks, lemon, yellow, orange, raspberry red, lemon, yellow, orange. I guess that's the way it goes. But they've come out with lots more colors. Dallas red, that's all shades of red, a trailing lavender, that's all lavender. So there's also one that's all gold. So chances are there's a lantana that will look good in your arrangements. I nixed these for a Girl Scout planter box because after the flower, it grows a berry. And everything says that these berries are toxic to children and pets. Well, they start out green and they turn purple. And I found out that in Central America and South America, they make jams out of the purple berries. So I'd really like to know what the deal is. But so far, everything that I read locally says toxic, so be wary. Anything else you need to know about lantana? I think that's it. Whoops. Okay, Vinca. Vinca with their shiny leaves always look crisp and clean and bright and ready, and they take the heat so well. And they come in lots of colors, and when the flower is finished, it dries up and blows away. You don't have to deadhead it. So it's a wonderful plant for the summer, really easy care. Petunias, been around forever. They have such a sweet fragrance. I'd wear petunia perfume, but nobody offers it. Wave petunias came along a few years ago, and that revived interest in petunias. If I'm planting wave petunias in the ground, I like to plant them like so they interlock like a wagon wheel spokes, because I think they tend to get leggy. And so if they can fill in for each other, I think they look better. In a basket, you need to keep them pinched back so they don't just get stringy and long, but they take the heat beautifully. But more recently, a super petunia came along that really revived interest, and that was super petunia Vista Bubblegum. Isn't that beautiful? There's also a white, but I don't think it really caught on as well as the pink. It's beautiful. Okay, marigolds. My mom won't plant marigolds because she says they get red spider. So be prepared to keep the humidity up. That helps with red spider. And there are several things on the market that you could use. I haven't ever had a problem with red spider with it, but they're cheerful, they're clean looking. They come in lots of different heights. They're giant ones that are, like almost waist high on me. I like to plant in pinks and blues and purples. And so my quilter friend said, I need a sparkle color. And so this is the one that I like to plant. And remember that a lot of butterflies like flowers with landing pads. So if a lot of your flowers are doubles, plant some singles so that they have a nice place to land. Marigolds do need deadheading, but they're lots of fun to deadhead, because when you grab the spent flower and pull it up, it makes a popping sound. And that's very satisfying to me. And then if you open this part right here, you'll find, whoops, we're going the wrong way. You'll find all of these black and white little sticks that are the seeds. And some people just, as they open them, they just toss them back into that bed, or you can take them in and save them for the next year. Okay, Angelonia. You know that Angelonia is a tough flower because they are in every blacktop parking lot in Wichita. Big black pots, Angelonia, beautiful spires. You get the height, you get the color. I don't think I've ever encountered a fragrant one, but apparently some of them smell really sweet. They're called summer snapdragons. If you look really closely at the flowers, you'll see they have that snapdragon appearance. Cosmos. Now, if you've only seen Cosmos in the little 4-packs or 6-packs in the greenhouse, you won't have been able to appreciate them. We treat them with a growth retardant because they really want to grow, and we need to keep them small for those little packs. So one year we had, it wasn't an open house, it was an open garden, because we just received our certification as a wildlife habitat and we wanted to show it off. And we had some paper that was impregnated with Cosmos seeds that was from a discontinued program at the zoo. And so at the end of our tours, we invited people to tear up these little flowers that had the seeds in them and just plant them in a 5-foot area that we had cleared. So they put them in, we covered them with soil and watered them. And this 6-foot bouquet grew right there in the middle of our garden. So give Cosmos a chance to grow, and they're just so pretty. And they're supposed to self-seed because our garden moved, our house moved. I didn't get to see them come back, but give them a try. Pentas are the best annual for attracting butterflies that I've ever seen. We had a house that had a bunch of pentas in it, and I walked in and I saw a butterfly tornado. They were just circling and coming down and getting a sip of nectar and circling and circling and circling. It was amazing to behold. It was pentas that drew the first hummingbird moth I ever saw. At first I thought it was a hummingbird, but I got to see it closely enough to know it was a hummingbird moth. Large moth with a big body, just so interesting. Pentas get their name from their 5-petal flowers. They come in tall and short and red and pink, so far as I know. But just if you want to attract butterflies, they are the thing to plant. Cleon spider plant. Okay. This is one that I had read about. Now, B-Balm attracts bees. Spider plant does not attract spiders. I had read that before it blooms, it goes through a stage where it looks like marijuana, which wasn't especially enticing to me. Also, that you should plant it far away from your house so you can admire it at a distance because it smells like a skunk. Also, not especially enticing to me. But one year I was working at the garden center And there was one poor, pathetic 6-pack left. And I felt sorry for it. So I took it home and I planted it. And 3 of them died immediately. And 3 of them started kind of struggling. And then it occurred to me that they might like some food. And I gave them some fish emulsion. And they just started growing fabulously. No marijuana stage, no skunk smell, just pretty, pretty flowers. And they're called spider plant because somebody thought that their anthers looked like spider legs. But don't worry, they're not going to draw them to your home. Okay, so those are some of the plants that I have enjoyed, but let me give you a few more tips about how to choose plants for your yard. Look around. If you live in a neighborhood where several of the houses were built at the same time, probably the soil is similar. And the soil type, when we lived in our other yard, greenhousemen had been amending that soil for 70 years. And my husband and I thought we were expert gardeners. And then we found out it was the quality of the soil. Now on the clay and the fill dirt, we're not nearly as great a gardener as we thought we were. If you're looking for plants that will do well in the full sun, and you're looking in your neighbor's yards, be sure to look in the south yard and the west yards. Those are the ones that get the hot sun. And stop and admire and ask. The worst thing that you can do is go to the door and you get some grunchy old guy who says, "No, my wife smells, I don't have anything done." But, and then if he gets his little wife out there, she'll just be so pleased and so tickled and take you out and show you and tell you about them and maybe even give you a start. And she will remember that forever, just like I'm still talking about the neighbor who asked about my Angara. So it's a great way to build relationships, is to admire each other's flowers. Another suggestion would be to plant natives or their cultivated relatives. And as I pointed out as we went through, a lot of those things that do so well here have cousins that are natives, that these may have been developed some more, but often their roots are in the Kansas soil. They were created to thrive in our conditions without chemicals or supplemental water. Now, I don't ever want them to go totally without watering, but if a time comes when you miss them, chances are they're going to survive. They could be stunted. They could be stressed, but they're not fussy. And it makes sense that the one who created the wildlife here and created the plants here would make them work together. So they do sustain our native wildlife. They're good choices for the animals in our area. Now, if you wanted to choose plants that would do really well here, how about if there was a program like from an ag school that had a research and extension department? It was nonprofit, it was educational. Nobody's paying them to say anything. They're just doing pure research. And they test these plants under harsh Kansas conditions. There's not a lot of water, there's not a lot of fertilizer, there's not a lot of mulch. The plants just basically have to make it on their own with just a little bit of care. Only the most spectacular make the list. If they're just kind of, they don't make the list. And if they're perennials, they have to come back real successfully. There would be separate lists for different things, so you could really hone in on the varieties you wanted. And with annuals, there are things that could never make the list for flowers because really they're a foliage plant, but they're a spectacular foliage plant. And there's some things that don't do that well just in the ground, but do fabulously in containers. So there was such a program. Prairie Bloom for the perennials and Prairie Star for the annuals, but it ran out of funding. And I think the people in charge may have retired. And I was so sad until I found out they kept all that information, and now you can find it on kansasroots.org. And this is just a picture I took from my computer with my phone and put it on here. And if you look right here where it says plant search, it is amazing. You can go in and you can type in the name of the plant if you want to, but you can also say, I'd like something that's yellow and 4 feet tall and likes hot sun and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it'll look through all of its records and find something for you. So kansasroots.org. You can find the botanical name, the common name, the characteristics and attributes, the flower color, the sun exposure, the plant height in inches, the plant width in inches, the flower height, if you've got a little tiny plant, but the flowers are much taller. And a picture of the flower, kansasroots.org. I was so glad to find that and see that they had kept all that great information. Much more. All right, I'd like to end with some inspirational thoughts. You can bury a lot of troubles by digging in the dirt. And Rudyard Kipling says, our England is a garden, and such gardens are not made by singing, oh, how beautiful, and sitting in the shade. Gardening simply does not allow one to be mentally old because too many hopes and dreams are yet to be realized. And then my favorite, your mind is a garden, your thoughts are the seeds. You can grow flowers or you can grow weeds. So thank you. I'm going to try to unshare this so that I can hear about the questions.
Well, somebody commented, you're such a delightful presenter, and I know you were looking for some, video feedback during your presentation, and you can rest assured I was chuckling over here in my little office. So
Thank you. I had no faces.
I'm sure a lot of our friends joining us today also found that quite delightful. So, but we did get some questions while you were talking. So the greenhouse that I think that your family runs, because this is one of the first ones, is it still open? And can you tell us what greenhouse is it?
It is open. We have a wholesale greenhouse, and in the spring we have satellite garden outlets, greenhouse outlets. But as a master gardener, it's really important not to plug any business with which one is associated. So you'd have to ask Matt if that's a question that I could answer.
Okay. Maybe Matt can throw that in the chat if that is something that he's able to do. And if he's not, then he can tell you how to find that information out. Okay, Russian sage.
Yes.
Do you cut it back? And if so, when?
Yes, in fact, I think I have a note on that. I don't. I just kind of let it go. I am a lazy gardener. I think you mentioned that.
I only mentioned it because you told me that. So.
Yeah, it says, cut the plants back by half after blooming to encourage a second flush of flowers.
Okay. How do you get rid of Johnson grass?
Oh my goodness. Do you know that Johnson grass was actually imported on purpose to be a supplemental cattle food? But in the times when we would really need a supplemental cattle food because it's either too hot or too cold, it becomes toxic. So there is no reason for it to be here except somebody meddled. But my husband believes that he has conquered it in our yard through constant mowing since 2013. So just mow it for about 9 years. Roundup is supposed to kill it, but there have been some concerns about some health concerns with Roundup. So mow it, mow it, mow it.
Only 9 years, huh? Of the perennials, which are the longest bloomers?
Everything that I mentioned from the time it starts blooming goes almost till frost. The autumn fire doesn't color until about August. The black-eyed Susan don't start until later in the summer, but each of these, once they start blooming, continue to bloom almost till frost. I like the ones that hang in there.
This person planted a blue indigo perennial last year and then cut it down in the fall without really thinking. Do you think it will come back for them?
Is it the wild indigo, the native plant? That's, I have not grown that. I have read about it, and it is a native, and I think it would probably be hard to kill it. I think chances are good that it'll come back.
I like those, the ones that are hard to kill. Yeah. How large do pentas grow?
The head of a penta is maybe a little smaller than an Osage orange. So they're a pretty good flower head.
Okay. This person dug up some perennials from my previous yard, but they don't seem to be growing in their new yard. Do you have any suggestions for how to get them to be successful?
If your soil is good, and I would sure add compost to it, they're always going to suffer some transplant shock, and I think you may be kind of like starting over with the first year they sleep, the second year they creep, the third year they leap. So give them some time, just as though they were a brand new plant. And because I'm an organic gardener, I often forget to fertilize until things are struggling later in the season. So some fish emulsion or some other kind of fertilizer would be good. And if they act like they're not getting established, I like some root stimulator.
Okay. Seems like good tips. Are the perennials that you mentioned, are any of them good cut flowers?
The Gallardia, if you get the ones with a little longer stem, are good cut flowers. Obviously, the yarrow will look beautiful forever. Let's see.
I cut some black-eyed Susans down in my yard last year. That was kind of fun, growing my own cut flowers.
I don't know how long. Oh, Angelonia. I'm sorry. Yeah, Angelonia, that's one of the annuals, but that makes a nice cut flower. Daylilies are only going to last a day no matter what you do to them, so they're not especially good. Yep, those are the ones that I would say.
Okay. This person moved their lilies, their irises, their tulips, their daffodils all last September. Do you think that's enough time for them to bloom this year? There's currently, it says have lots of green, so I'm going to assume that means the green is popping up out of the ground.
I don't know. It just depends on what the conditions were last year and whether they'd had a chance to store a lot of what they needed. You know, that's why tulips are short-lived here, because they don't have quite enough weeks to store what they need. But I would think that would be okay. I would have good hopes for those.
Well, we'll keep our fingers crossed for this person. And this is one I can answer. The recording for this program will be posted to our YouTube page. That usually takes us at least a week usually to get it produced and uploaded. So just check back to our Wichita Public Library YouTube channel. And this is a follow-up to the Penta question. The question was not necessarily about the blooms, but how large the entire plant gets.
Oh, 18 inches across maybe, and there are tall ones and there are short ones, and so be sure you get whichever of those you want.
Okay. This person is expanding their butterfly garden. Do you have any recommendations on the type of soil to put in there?
Not clay and fill dirt. No, as far as soil, something that is rich in compost, I just think you can't beat that. So, and one of the things besides the lawnmower that I think may be responsible for some of our plants not coming back in this yard as well as they did in the last yard was because even if the plants flourish all summer, if they don't have good drainage over the winter, they aren't likely to survive. So really good drainage, but compost will help. If it's too sandy, it will help slow down the flow of water. If it's too much clay, it'll break apart the sticky little pieces. So never add sand to clay thinking that you'll even it out. You'll just get brick. But compost.
Okay. And I'll just throw out a little shout. We had a program on composting last week. So if you missed that one, you can find that one on our YouTube page, hopefully pretty soon, if not already. Does Kansas Roots, that website you gave us earlier, tell you where you can find them?
I don't think so because it's not a commercial program. And I remember reading, do not expect any garden center to have all of these. Take your list and go from store to store to store. I, of course, recommend independently owned, locally grown, instead of the big box stores, but I know there are people who are very happy with what they find there too.
Okay. And would any of these perennials also do okay in the part shade?
As we said, nothing in Kansas minds a little bit of shelter from the really hot afternoon sun. Because we live beside the bridge on South Broadway, there would be a time in the afternoon where it would be in shade, it would be blocked by the shadow of the bridge, and they didn't mind that at all. So a little bit of shade in that hot afternoon would be great.
Okay. Now you mentioned fish emulsion. Can you kind of explain what that is?
Oh, it's just a fertilizer that the protein in it is from fish. It's just an organic type of fertilizer. I'm sure there are plenty of other kinds. It's just what we had.
Okay. Then do you often feed bone meal to your flowering plants?
Bone meal, I understand, is good for bulbs. We haven't done bone meal or blood meal since the mad cow disease scare back several years ago. We just haven't bought it again since then. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with it. That just kind of turned us off.
Okay, that's fair. I have reached the end of the questions that have been submitted. So let me use this opportunity to put in a call for any other questions that you might have. If you were waiting on at your chance, now is it. And I will also take this opportunity to put our, oh, did I close that? Silly me, I think I did. Our evaluation link into the chat box. We do appreciate your feedback when you give it to us. You can let us know if there's any other gardening programs or other kinds of programs that you want to see. And just let us know. Let us know how you felt about today's program. And you can put in all kinds of nice little messages, and I'll make sure that Len gets all of those. And Matt, if you are around, we had a follow-up on whether or not Lynn can share her greenhouse information.
Sure, so that shouldn't be a problem if she wants to tell us a little bit more about her history.
Okay.
Well, the wholesale greenhouse is Campbell's Phoenix Greenhouse down on South Topeka, and they have the Plant Kingdom greenhouse outlets on North Hillside, East Kellogg, and then down there on South Topeka too.
There you go. Awesome. And then do Pentas and Lantana, did I say that right? Do they do well together in groupings?
I don't know of any reason that they wouldn't, and that would be pretty color contrast. The Penta flower is going to be much larger than the Lantana.
And then would most of these plants be available to us in those locations?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. They're still coming in. Sorry, can you tell us one more time the name of your greenhouse?
The wholesale greenhouse, which is just for businesses and landscapers and stuff, is Campbell's Phoenix Greenhouse. The Phoenix is not for the city. It's because there was a devastating fire in the 90s when we lost most of it, and it has arisen from the ashes as a phoenix. But the outlets are called Plant Kingdom. We did have full-size big garden centers for a while, but then the big box stores came along and we went to this spring satellite kind of thing.
Okay.
The South Topeka showroom is open all year long.
And just a quick comment from Matthew. We have a lot of great greenhouses in Wichita, and we're lucky to have Lynn here tonight to share all of her greenhouse and plant expertise. So, and just so you don't think Matthew is a random person that we were asking questions, he is our liaison with the Kansas State Research and Extension Office. He's a ornamental horticultural agent, I want to say. Okay, well, let's do a final call for questions. And if there aren't any, then we'll let everybody go a little bit early this evening. And I will do one final plug for our evaluation. Well, I don't see any, and I'm not going to sit here with dead air. So, oh, we had one last one get in. Root stimulator. Do you have any suggestions for that?
I think Rootone is the name of it. And I think if you went to Johnson's or Dutch's or one of those places, you would find it.
Okay. Well, thanks again to all of you for joining us tonight. Thank you, Lynn, for all of your expertise and making it quite entertaining at that. So you can all join us next week for Growing a Fruitful Landscape. And if you haven't registered for that, you are still able to do so. And we'll see you all next week.